potential, we get 0.52 volts of UPS 0.57. So we're getting almost all the potential out of the silicon. So I don't have to drive it as hard, and I'm storing sunlight. What happens if you wires two cells together? So here's one cell, I wire a second cell. Now I should get 0.52 plus 0.52, it's 1.04. I need 1.3 to split water. That means I'm 0.3 volts away. Things look perfect. Right? Now I only need to put in 0.3 volts of current from the wall when sun is shining on it. This isn't rocket science. If I add a third cell, I shouldn't need any more wires, right? I can put this in a glass of water. My silicon is operating in simple conditions. So the question is, can you do that? We get a solar cell from Zunlight. Zunlight has engineered this triple junction silicon. So amorphous silicon has a strained silicon lattice, so that absorbs over here. If you put germanium in it, you relax the strain, that moves the absorption spectrum over to here. You put more germanium, it's here. So these guys did a heck of a job at engineering the solar spectrum. So you're doing the semiconductor free of catalysis. Now I put my catalyst on there. This, remember, single junction silicon puts out 0.6 volts. I have triple junction. I should be at around 1.8. I had 30 milliamps per centimeter squared. Divide by 3. I should be at 10 milliamps. It's 8. So everything looks perfect here. This solar cell is a 7% solar cell. I now bring sunlight into it. I've made my hamburger, so this really looks like a hamburger to us. It's just layers. And I can drop it in a glass of water. I do this because I just like looking at myself during my talk. I'm sorry. So I actually made a movie at Sundance, and the guys that were doing the movie, the producer said, "No, sir, show me that this works. Just drop it in the water and go up to the window." So I did. And so what this is, oops, I can't hit this button. Wait a minute. We're almost done. So that now is just the piece of silicon coated. We've dropped it in a glass of water. Sunlight's coming through. The holes are coming to the front surface. That's where the cobalt is. The back side has the nickel catalyst. The electrons are going there. So just like the leaf, sunlight in, wireless current. You do it 4 times. You store 4 positive charges in the cobalt, 4 negative charges in the nickel molybdenum zinc alloy. You split water. You make O2. The protons run around the backside where the electrons are waiting for them. Hydrogen comes out. You've spatially separated oxygen over here, hydrogen here, so you don't have any collection problems. And it works using the sun. And it's running at 30 milliamps per centimeter squared. The overall efficiency, so you can find movies like this. They've been around forever. People show them all the time, but they're scamming you because they're using a wide bandgap semiconductor. So this is what's called the IV curve of the semiconductor, the current voltage curve. Because it's a wide bandgap, say 3 volts, I showed you some of those at the beginning of the talk. Here's the IV characteristic of the catalyst. We now know that's called the Tafel slope. So if I look at the IV characteristic here, it's where the two intersect that I should get my maximum power efficiency for sunlight to fuel. If you have a 3-volt semiconductor, most oxides, you have all day to get to the top of that curve. You can have the junkiest catalyst in the world, you never notice it. And you do use the junkiest catalyst in the world. You use the oxide. And I told you those things can't do the 4-proton, 4-electron transfer. This red curve is the power curve for the Zunlight solar cell. There's my Tafel slope. It intersects at 5%. For a 7% cell, sunlight in, I'm doing a 70% conversion of chemistry to solar fuels being driven by the solar cell. It says 5. When you measure the amount of hydrogen and oxygen, you're 4.9%. How do you, and you don't want to make this curve go away from the thermodynamic potential, because the further out it goes, the less sunlight it's absorbing. So you're always stuck in around this gray bar where water oxidation occurs in these buried junctions. So you have to be really good at catalyst design and proton-coupled ET to get this curve to rise sharply, meaning you got to do that 4-electron, 4-proton chemistry. If you look in JAX in the last few weeks, you're going to find this new catalyst we did, a nickel borate. I told you this cobalt was Nernstian, 1 electron. So remember Nernst's law, N is in the denominator. If I make a catalyst where the resting state is a 2-electron, 2-proton, N's in the denominator, I should go from 60 millivolts to 30, a steeper curve, and lo and behold, it works, and you get even a more efficient cell. Now, depending on what solar cell we're using, we're running at 85 to 90% efficiency, sunlight into solar fuels. If you want to go to 10%, what should you do? Don't use a 7% cell. Now you should go and use a 12% cell, and then you'll be at a 10% efficiency. So we're doing that right now. Next to last slide, the one other thing we're doing, we now have a really simple way to make catalysts on silicon in a buried junction device, drop in a water to work. What's the next goal? Can I make this under high throughput manufacturing conditions? At Harvard, Professor Roy Gordon, my colleague at Harvard, Roy is one of the pioneers of chemical vapor deposition. He has the patents on e-glass, you know, the energy efficient glass using CVD. People like Corning, glass companies can run CVD, automobile companies, all your glass in your car is treated by CVD. Runs at 1,000 meters per minute. Look at what Corning just did. They've made this stuff called willow glass. It's totally flexible glass. So one thing you can look for in the next year or two is Roy and I working really hard. Roy's also interested in getting rid of the amorphous silicon. Amorphous silicon, there are no big plants making amorphous silicon. They make crystalline silicon. So in my labs, we're building crystal silicon cells. But Roy would like to get rid of the silicon and just spray a semiconductor with the right band gap down on the glass as it's going by. And then we're working with him and his group to make the cobalt and the phosphate precursors to just build everything just by spraying as the glass is going by. And that will increase the manufacturing rates and make this cost even drop further. So those are sorts of some of the things you can look for. So I'll end with belief. We really like it, if nothing more, to show that if you start with a blank piece of paper, we looked at where cost was, and that told us what science we needed to invent. Self-healing catalysts, layers, buried junctions, control the interfacial charge transport. I'm not showing you all of that to make this thing work. And then you get something, there's no wiring, no membranes. By the way, if the protons have to run around the back, that's an ohmic problem. So what you do, just poke holes through the silicon. They don't have to run around. You know, it gets pretty simple now. Works in any water, simple engineering, highly manufacturable. It really looks like a hamburger to us. So unfortunately for Harry, I think he had greater plans for me, and my life ambition was to be the McDonald's of energy systems. I wish I could have done prouder for him. But we just wanted to make the hamburger of energy. And I'm going to end with this final quote, and it's Mr. Tata. So Mr. Tata's company, Tata conglomerate, has built most of India. And his grandfather and his family started this company to take Indians from poverty in the 30s and elevate them to an emerging and rising middle class. That's what that company exists for. And then they happen to make money. But when Mr. Tata gets up in the morning, what he cares about is how do I employ Indians and make my country better. That's a $140 billion conglomerate now. Okay? So you can make money, but that's not what drives him. And he's been imploring all of you to start doing science that appeals to the poor, meaning you got to get up in the morning and think a little differently about what science you're going to do for them. Just to give you a little heads up, in India alone, in the next 25 years, there'll be 352 million people coming from poverty to the rising middle class, which is the entire population of the United States of America. So to get back to the idea of Brian Furness, you better take care of them if you want a sustainable planet. And the way to do that is to give them food, water, and energy at low cost. And that means invent, invent, invent. So with that, thank you for your attention.